Hello and welcome to another complete OCR GCSE PE lesson. In this one we'll be breaking down past exam questions relating to topic 1.4, specifically the second set of learning objectives on the structure and function of the respiratory system. If you feel you need a recap of the content at any point during this video, you'll find another video covering everything you need to know in the description. By the way, if you like the slides I use in my videos, which cover the entire OCR syllabus and include the past questions and model answers we'll be covering in this video, you can find a link to my resource store in the description as well. Okay, let's begin. Figure 2 shows a diagram of the lungs. Draw on Figure 2 to indicate the position of the diaphragm during inhalation. During inhalation, which means breathing in, the diaphragm contracts and flattens, increasing the volume of the thoracic cavity and lungs. So to get the mark here, we need to make sure that the diaphragm is relatively flat and not domed upwards. The second part of the question, describe the role of the diaphragm during exhalation or breathing out, and that is it relaxes and domes upwards. This would of course decrease the volume of the thoracic cavity and lungs, increasing pressure inside the lungs and causing air to diffuse outwards. Next up, describe the role of the intercostal muscles during expiration, which again is breathing out. The answer I provided here is that the intercostal muscles relax, allowing the rib cage to move downwards and inwards. Next question from the same paper, Figure 7 shows the pathway of air through the respiratory system. Put the following words in the correct order to complete Figure 7. So air moves through the nose or mouth, through the trachea, into the two bronchi, which are the two branches of the trachea. One directs air to the left lung and one to the right. These bronchi branch off into smaller branches called bronchioles, which divert air to the alveoli. For the second part of this question, you need to describe the function of the alveoli, which is to allow gaseous exchange to occur. Oxygen diffuses from the alveoli into the blood in the surrounding capillaries, while carbon dioxide diffuses from the blood into the alveoli. For this one, you would gain a mark for simply stating that gaseous exchange is the function of the alveoli, as well as mentioning what happens to oxygen and carbon dioxide. Describe the role of the trachea in the respiratory system, and this one is to allow the passage of air to the lungs, and I've put in brackets here from the mouth or nose to the bronchi. Next, you need to describe the function of the intercostal muscles during inspiration. So when we breathe in, the intercostal muscles contract, moving the rib cage upwards and outwards, and that is enough for the mark here, but I've also included that this increases the volume of the thoracic cavity and lungs. Next, Figure 3 shows some of the structures of the respiratory system. Name the structures labelled A and B. So A is of course the trachea and B is alveoli. Define the following terms. You need to know the terms tidal volume, minute ventilation, and breathing rate. Tidal volume is the volume of air inhaled or exhaled per breath, and minute ventilation is the volume of air inhaled or exhaled per minute. Next, you need to explain the effects of exercise on tidal volume and minute ventilation. And tidal volume and minute ventilation, of course, both increase during exercise, and I've put in brackets here to meet the greater demand for oxygen in the working muscles. Which one of the following describes the correct pathway of air through the respiratory system? The correct answer here is of course option B. Air passes through the nose, into the trachea, which branches off into the two bronchi, then the bronchioles, and finally the alveoli, the site of gaseous exchange. Okay, final question for this video. Figure 6 below shows the respiratory rate for two hockey players before, during, and after a match. And this isn't really relevant, it's just a bit of contextual information. The question here is to explain the role of the respiratory muscles during inspiration while player A is performing in the hockey match. So during inspiration, the intercostal muscles contract, pulling the ribcage upwards and outwards, and the diaphragm contracts and flattens. The volume of the thoracic cavity increases as a result, decreasing air pressure in the lungs. And since molecules always diffuse from areas of high to low pressure, this would cause atmospheric air to move into the lungs. In terms of where the marks come from here, you get 1 for stating that the intercostal muscles contract, 1 for mentioning that this causes the rib cage to move upwards and outwards, and 1 for stating that the diaphragm contracts and flattens during inspiration. You'd also get another mark for stating that this increases the volume of the thoracic cavity or lungs, and also for mentioning that this leads to a decrease in air pressure within the lungs relative to that of outside or atmospheric air. And I've put that one in orange orange because we've already gained 4 marks from the previous points. Okay, so that's everything for this video on the structure and function of the respiratory system. Join me next time for the third and final part of topic 1.4 on aerobic and anaerobic exercise.